people buy from people, if a choice has to be made, I would be recommending that those founders and those salespeople and whoever are in charge of commercial within these organizations, they're the ones that are spending that time being present on these channels.
Today, I'm quite excited to be having a conversation with Jason Bradwell, a gentleman I've known for many, many years. And our objective today is to discuss a topic which I think is very relevant to a lot of small and medium businesses, which is the anatomy of the modern day salesperson. So, Jason, I thank you again for joining us. Maybe just to help the people who are listening, could you perhaps maybe give a little bit of a background on yourself, your experience, what your journey has taken you to now in your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here and to be one of the kind of inaugural guests for Not Always Tech. So yeah, a bit of background on me. I've kind of been exposed to this whole kind of anatomy of a salesperson kind of conversation from a couple of different angles over my kind of 12, 13-year career so far, which is that, as a marketer, by trade, for the vast majority of my professional life, I have always been a partner to the sales team, and specifically a partner to a sales team that is selling into enterprise accounts and the kind of characteristics that come with those accounts, long sales cycles, complex buying committees, the need to kind of establish real deep trust, not just with the business, but with the people within that business who ultimately are putting their kind of careers and reputations on the lines when, choosing to spend millions and millions of dollars on a technology vendor. And now running kind of my own agency and my own services business, I am the salesperson, right? And I feel that, the skills that I've picked up over my time working in the kind of enterprise sales environment as a marketer, the skills that I've picked up there have translated really well into now running what I would call a kind of, founder-led business. And the way that we win deals here at B2B Better, I think, really talk to a lot of those skills and those practices. So very excited to be having this conversation with you today, Sakib.
Well, it's going to be a challenging conversation for sure. The first place I'd like to start with is the relationship between marketing and sales. This is something that you and I have had other conversations about historically. How do you see the marketing function and how it connects to sales specifically, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about the enterprise sales cycle, I've always said this, marketing is an enablement function for the sales team. And I think a lot of kind of B2B marketing strategic advice that you find online written for, predominantly kind of SaaS audiences, where the product, it's kind of high volume, low price point, just kind of get it off the shelf as quickly as you can, where there is more of a direct conversion play from marketing. It's very attractive to kind of follow the quote unquote best practices, that come from that advice, and almost think that marketing can kind of do more, right, than it actually can across that enterprise sales environment. If you're selling $1 million technology solution, marketing is not going to post something on LinkedIn and see a check come through the door the next day. They have to accept that their function within the business is one of enabling sales to sell better. Now, that's a really important function because I'm sure, as we're going to get into, I think a lot of enterprise salespeople today are still running outdated playbooks when it comes to acquiring, converting and nurturing deals, and actually would do really well to turn to their marketing colleagues and say, we understand that the B2B buyer is changing, the way that they, research new solutions that are going to help them solve their problems is not the same as it was 20 years ago. They are much more independent in that kind of initial discovery and research part of the journey. What kind of marketing best practices and principles can we adopt that are going to allow us to be visible and play a role in that kind of independent self-discovery phase for the B2B buyer? Because it is things like, developing thought leadership materials and being active on social media and thinking more strategically about how do we present ourselves at events. And so, yeah, when I think about marketing and sales in that environment, two sides of the same coin, but marketing kind of has to get off its high horse a little bit and understand that its role is to help sales sell better, not to try and make sales themselves.
So I completely agree with that. I mean, one of the things that you said to me, I think it was maybe like 6 months ago, 5 months ago, and we were having this conversation, was that marketing as a function, it's actually quite difficult to prove its ROI because it's not a revenue generating department, but it's indirectly revenue producing. Therefore, it's quite difficult to completely measure it. And it's quite frequent, actually, in a lot of businesses when they're tight for cash, it's marketing who gets cold. And that's wrong, in my opinion, because visibility is one of the prime directives of a business in order for you to create that situation in which you can sell.
Yeah, and look, I think, it's become a little bit of a cliche that in downturns, like we are in at the moment, broadly speaking across the tech industry, marketing is the first kind of line item to cut out of the budget because of what you just said there. Exactly. It's incredibly hard to generate or to establish and demonstrate like a tangible revenue ROI figure against that. It's easy for me to sit here as a marketing person and say, actually, during these times, this is when you should be doubling down when everyone else is pulling back. Not because, marketing for marketing's sake and like to kind of hit some sort of vanity, metric, but because, in aid of your sales team who are already out there struggling with customers that are taking much longer to make decisions, that are being much more cash conservative, giving them more tools in their arsenal to go out there and prove value and demonstrate awareness. This is the time to be capitalizing on that opportunity. That doesn't mean that we should be kind of just throwing kind of dollars around and putting them into marketing programs
and Google ad spend just for the sake of it and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. We need to, absolutely take a step back and think more strategically around, okay, how do we move away from those perhaps vanity projects that we're currently running and reinvest them into the programs that are going to help sales sail better? But what I would be saying to anyone who is thinking about cutting their marketing budget at this time is, there's research that came out from, I think it's called the Ehrenberg Institute, Ehrenberg Bass Institute, a couple of years ago, which showed that at any given time, only 5% of your customers are in market. So if you have 100, potential customers out there in the world, only 5 of them are actually looking for a service or solution that you're selling today. 95 of them are not. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not potential customers of yours. They're just, for whatever reason, not in a buying position today. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't be, leveraging the marketing and sales tools that we have at our disposal to try and, build relationships, establish trust, move those people along the funnel to the point of conversion? No, absolutely not. Because also, all of your competitors alongside you are all going after that 5% of customers that are in market at this given time. What an opportunity that's presented to you to say, okay, well, we're still going to continue going after that 5%, as is everyone else. But while no one's looking at the remaining 95, we're going to be equipping our salespeople with the modern day tools and skills that they need to go out there so that when the 95% do flip to being in market, we're top of mind and we're ready to go.
I know historically, and there is this kind of psychology in when businesses are marketing, they say, okay, well, we're only going to market on the professional channels. We're only going to market our business on the professional channels. But if your buyers are consuming content on other channels, the ones where for some reason businesses don't go to, like Instagram, or, I mean, I understand retail businesses, they will obviously market on Instagram and stuff, but say, software services company, do you think a software services company should be putting content on a TikTok or a YouTube or even a Facebook for the sake of argument?
Mm-hmm. It's not so much do I think they should be doing it, but actually more that there are plenty of examples of B2B businesses and software businesses that are already doing it and seeing great success. And so like one that comes to mind for me is a company called Trainual. They're based out in the US, very big on Instagram. So they have quite a significant Instagram following. They, for example, one campaign they ran, they went on to Cameo. They interviewed, they bought clips from the actors and actresses of the US office, kind of, not reprising their roles, but like playing kind of certain characteristics of their roles on that TV show. One's like very lazy, and one's a bit of an alcoholic, and one's like really angry all the time. And they had these actors kind of quasi as their characters talk to the kind of some of the features and the platforms of some of the features on the platform that they have. And they published that on Instagram, and they were able to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue and a ton of kind of new registrations to the platform, because they were creating interesting, entertaining content that felt natural for the platform, but that was talking to a B2B audience. And it's a bit of a circuit break, because if you're scrolling through your feed and you're an Office fan, and you're seeing the recipe videos and dance videos, and then suddenly, oh wait, is that like Stanley Hudson from The Office? What's I'm a fan of Stanley. Like, what's he saying? He's talking about a piece of B2B SaaS software. All right, well that's pretty interesting. I want to know more about the company that's kind of pulled this together. I'm going to go onto their website, and I'm going to check out the platform. And if it's relevant to me, I'll sign up. And so, do I think they should be doing it? Yes. Do I think B2B software companies should be on these channels? Yes. Like if there's intuition or research to suggest that some of their B2B buyers are on those channels, and we can create content that feels native for that platform, why not? Because I guarantee 95% of your competitors aren't doing it. But I can give you another example as well, just really quickly. Software is one thing, but like the types of customers that I work with at B2B Better, other than software, are working in, kind of like non-digital legacy industries, construction, manufacturing, legal, what have you. And for anyone who is sitting there listening to this episode and thinking like, as a salesperson, like what business do I have being on platforms like, TikTok or Instagram or what have you, I'd recommend checking out a company called Vilpe, Vilpe. They are a roofing manufacturer based out in the northernmost part of Finland that, at last time I checked, had over 120,000 followers on TikTok. What business does the founder of a Finnish roofing manufacturer have being on TikTok? Well, actually, there's plenty of business to be had there, because they publish kind of daily videos telling the story about, the business, the products they're launching, showing off the people and the culture within that organization, doing Q&As. And because they have interesting characters within that business as employees, because they're consistent, because the content is interesting and it blends that mix of education and entertainment, they have been able to carve themselves out a niche, which is generating them, significant ROI, both from a sales perspective, but also from a recruitment perspective. They've never had more CVs, having spoken to the founder recently about this, they've never had more CVs coming into their business since launching their TikTok. People wanting to move up to where they are and into their factory to be part of this culture they're building. And so just two examples there, one on the software side in Trainual and one on the non-software side in Vilpe, that prove if you do it right and you're consistent and you think strategically around the goals and how we're going to execute to deliver on those goals on these platforms, you can find real success.
Let me ask you a question which kind of brings this back round full circle. You've spoken a lot about the function of marketing and sales and how they essentially interact with each other in your experience. We've spent some time talking about social media channels, content creation for businesses, and how actually the B2B channels aren't necessarily going to be as effective as the B2C channels. Obviously, some of these B2C channels is where buyers are sitting. Does that mean that the salesperson or the person who's working on commercial in a business should also be themselves on these social media channels? Should they be content producers? Should they be creating shorts? Should they also be mirroring the activities that we think that businesses should be doing?
I would say that in many kind of situations, given the choice between a brand being active and present on these channels versus an individual that works for that brand being active and present on these channels, it makes more sense for the latter to do so. Like if you have to pick one, because ultimately people buy from people. and particularly in enterprise, where it, as I mentioned earlier, comes down to, how much do I trust this person on the other side of the table who's telling me their platform does all these magical, amazing things that are going to solve all my problems that I have to spend millions of dollars to acquire? Like, how much do I trust this person that is actually going to not land me in a situation where I'm having to kind of defend my validity and job performance if I get the wrong decision? With that being said, like, people buy from people, if a choice has to be made, I would be recommending that those founders and those salespeople and whoever are in charge of commercial within these organizations, they're the ones that are spending that time being present on these channels. Now, I appreciate it's not for everyone, and some people just don't feel like they have the skills or the appetite or the bandwidth to go out there and be present 24/7 on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever. And so for those people, I would say, one, I think it's a bit of a ticking time bomb. Like, eventually you're going to have to adapt and become present on these channels, because it's just the way the world is moving in regards to how B2B buyers find vendors and ultimately go through that buying process. But if you're not the one who necessarily wants to spend all this time creating this content, work with other departments in your business, i.e. marketing, who can help give you a leg up, and can they help on the content ideation side of things? Can they help on the production side of things? Like, what's holding you back from doing this? And then turn to the people in the business who can help you overcome those blockers and those challenges.
I think a good modern day salesperson, particularly in technology, based on my experience, is someone who is not afraid to put themselves out there on social media channels, not afraid to turn themselves into a bit of a brand, not afraid to, create content, whether it be shorts, whether it be slightly longer form content and stuff like this. Now, when I think about salespeople, I'm almost thinking about them the same way that the modeling industry changed. These days, modeling industry won't hire a model unless they have a certain amount of followers. And so I'm also asking myself that question before I hire a salesperson: how many followers do they have?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And for me, when I think about kind of what it means to be an enterprise salesperson, I think one of the biggest kind of indicators of success is, how good is this salesperson at creating kind of moments of connection with prospects across this sales cycle. Because you've been there and I've been there, and I think a lot of people listening to this have probably been there when they're selling across kind of long sales cycles. You may meet someone at an event. They tell you how excited they are to meet you and to learn about your product and that it's going to solve all their problems. And yeah, definitely, we're going to book a follow-up call as soon as I get back home, yada, yada, yada. And then they just go quiet. And you go from this kind of like euphoric high of, oh, great, big deal coming into the pipeline here, to where did that go? And I think the kind of conventional way of then following up and creating that moment is like, hey, here's an email, like, great meeting you at the event. Do you still want to have that meeting so I can talk you through our fact sheet? Do you want to meet at this other event? Like, no response, no response, no response. I think kind of what separates like the old school salespeople and the new salespeople, who are actually generating kind of long-term value and kind of tapping into that 95% of customers that are out of market, are the ones that when they're thinking about that next follow-up, they're thinking about that next moment, they're thinking about how can I add value at that stage? And that value is often can be created through the development of content and thought leadership and sharing a point of view and a perspective. Like, how much more impactful would it be to send a prospect an email or drop them a call or whatever, and instead of saying, hey, just chasing up, just following up, how are things, saying, hey, I know when we spoke last time, you were really worried about issue X. Like, I've actually just created a piece of content. I've recorded a podcast. I've published a YouTube video, whatever, where we're talking about some of these themes. I think you'd be interested in checking it out. And like, if you've got any other questions, just let me know. And maybe they don't get back to you, right? But at least you've led from a place of value. And, if you can do that consistently and you're patient, eventually there's going to come a point where that customer does flip from being out of market to in market. They become one of the 5%, and they think, who can help me with this problem? Well, it's probably, Jason, who's been sending me all this like amazing thought leadership content for the last year and a half. Like, he clearly knows what he's doing. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to at least give him a call. And so, I think that's kind of the biggest separator between the kind of good and the great salespeople is not just like, how do I follow, not just can I follow up, but like, how do I follow up with that person? How do I create these moments?
I think the minute that you see someone, there's a slightly more tangible connection to that person because you can see their face, you can see how they behave, you can see their body language. And we as humans, I think we crave having that kind of connection with people. And so, and now I'm thinking like, with the salespeople, that this is taking that concept one step further and saying, hey, if you're selling therapy, make videos about, like shorts or whatever, and post them online about how, what your opinions are necessarily on certain things to do with therapy or certain issues in the world. If it be, selling software sales in the media industry, maybe actually, be open to and being brave and putting your opinions out there about the media industry and, allowing people to connect with it. Some people will, some people won't.
Absolutely. And look, I think, it all sounds great, like what we're talking about here. And I'm sure like everyone's kind of nodding their head saying like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. But then as soon as they finish listening to this episode and they kind of go away and they think about the practicalities of like, how do I actually start doing this? It could be very easy for them to be put off. Just like bandwidth wise, where do I fit this in to like my already overflowing day? That's number one. Two, do I have a point of view or a unique insight that I can kind of consistently beat the drum about? That's the second thing. Three, do I have buy-in, from the organization at large? Because not only am I going to start dedicating this time to a new program, but that time is now going to be taken away from the programs that we already are running that may only be working 50% of the time, but they are working. Four, like on that buy-in point, if I'm a salesperson, like I don't want to say something that's going to land me in hot water. Is me going out there and being more vocal going to lead me to a situation where my boss thinks that I'm not as serious about my business anymore? And like I'm trying to build my own profile up in pursuit of like getting a better job somewhere down the line. Like these are all challenges that are going to be thrown up when it comes to for a salesperson, maybe less so for a founder, but like for a salesperson, these are all challenges that may come up when they're thinking about kind of creating thought leadership content. And that's why I think that these types of activities, they need to be a kind of top-down strategic initiative. You need to have buy-in at a leadership level that we are going to give this the time, the space, the resources it needs to really start generating some kind of measurable kind of success metrics. And we understand that it's going to be an experiment. This is creative work. Creativity is not, formulaic. We're going to get some hits. We're going to get a lot of misses. But we believe that by investing now, we are going to benefit from the compounding interest of B2B buyer behavior is changing. It is becoming more independent across that kind of discovery research phase of the buying journey. We are increasingly getting closed out of that part of the process. Like clients of ours are not coming to trade shows and that's where they're doing all their research anymore. It is much more digital, online. Where can I find, word of mouth, like dark social is a term that gets bandied around. Like who am I talking to in my network on these channels we can't measure to find the right solutions? We don't have a opportunity to play in that space unless we're creating thought leadership content that's keeping us top of mind, is demonstrating our credibility, and is building trust.
I'd like to just swing it back round to you, right back to the beginning where we started, where we were talking about this wonderful cross-section of experience that you've had in, like small business, medium business. You were in journalism once upon a time as well. And then obviously working in a much larger business and then being in a startup. I'd like to, in your own words, understand when transitioning from a larger organization to a startup or your own startup, what do you think were the biggest things that you noticed changed, and what were the biggest learning lessons?
So I think when I started my career, the goal was always to work for a humongous organization. Like I wanted to work for an Ericsson or a Sky or a BBC. That was always the goal. And I started working in a company of just me and the founder, and slowly kind of worked my way up through different businesses from, 2 people to 10 people to 50 people to 200 people to 500 people to 1,000 people. And by the time I got to like 1,000, I started to realize, actually, you know what, for me personally, the bigger this business has gotten, the harder I've found to kind of operate in that business, because the larger it's become, the more bureaucracy has been introduced, the more red tape I have to fight through. And, I am much more of the disposition of, let's get this done rather than let's get this perfect, and asking for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. And as soon as you start getting into that kind of like 1,000-person like business size, and particularly, when you've got big name clients that you have to think about, it becomes much harder to run that type of, kind of mindset. And so for me, it was a natural choice to kind of start my own business, because suddenly then the bureaucracy and the red tape, doesn't exist, because I'd be the one to implement in the first place. And I am much more empowered to go out there and like ask for forgiveness rather than permission in the pursuit of getting things done. And, why I bring this story up is, I think, for people listening to this show, and I know that you've spoken to Bern from Arc Fusion on another episode, who's also kind of gone through a similar journey of like big company in McKinsey to starting up his own startup. I think it's just becoming like, as you kind of progress through your career, like understand what you want to get out of your career, but be open to the idea of like that goal changing as you learn more and as you gain more experience. And, as soon as that goal does change, not everyone has the luxury to just immediately drop everything and kind of go out in pursuit of it. But there are moves that you can start making to get you there. And for me, just drawing it back to kind of content creation and thought leadership, that was my story. I was in a position where I couldn't leave my large organization to go out and start my own business due to some kind of equity allocation. And like, I wanted to see that vest. So 2 years before the company ultimately sold, I began creating my own thought leadership material online. I launched my podcast. I was more active on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I started building an audience and a following. And I was doing all of that because I knew at some point in the future, I would go out there and start my own business. I would go back to startup land, and I would be best positioned to do that if I had a network, an audience, a following to launchpad off of. And so it was a strategic 2-year investment. And absolutely, when I did ultimately take the leap, I did so with 150 grand in pipeline and already 4 clients on my roster from day one. There was no gap. And so, what this is a story of is a story of, understanding your goals, being flexible and adaptable to those goals changing, and, making bets today that ultimately are going to pay off in the future in pursuit of those goals.
Now that you've had this good cross-section of experience that I keep on referring to, if you had one thing that you could say to that younger Jason, based on your experience, what would you say?
I think I would say to him, don't worry so much. I think, and this kind of ties back to the conversation we've been having today around like, someone taking that leap into being more visible and more public, right? I think often that kind of stems from a place of worry and concern. Like, as soon as I make myself public, I make myself vulnerable, and I don't want to feel vulnerable, so I'm not going to do it. And I was very much in that kind of state at the beginning of my career. And I put that down to kind of just, being young and like not wanting to,
of course, I mean, there's a whole confidence building thing, right, in the journey, right?
Exactly. But, arguably, I knew a lot of what I knew, I know now back then, right? And I could have been more vocal about it and put myself out there more. And that may have in turn created more opportunities for me. And so, to be able to go back and say, look, it's going to be okay. The worst that can happen is someone disagrees with you. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing if it helps you understand your worldview a bit better. Like, just do it. I think that kind of advice would have served me really well back then. But, I got there. It just maybe took a little bit longer than it needed to.
But all right, cool. Well, look, I think we've managed to cover this wonderful subject of the anatomy of a modern day salesperson. I'm very, very grateful for you jumping on with this on the subject with me. Just one thing for all the people listening, Jason has his B2B Better business. If you are looking for someone who can help you reach new channels and new media channels for promoting your business, definitely have a conversation. If you're looking to translate your modern day marketing strategies and connect them to the commercial strategies, definitely also have a conversation with him. Beyond that, thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I look forward to that other podcast in 10 years.
Yes, me too.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much, mate. It's been a real pleasure being on.